Thank you for choosing Minority Alliance Organization meeting today. Today, we'll be discussing a few current events that have been occurring over the past few weeks. First, we kind of want to start off with the COVID recovery still and seeing a lot of African American businesses seeing a huge hit from that. A lot of African American homeowners affected by the COVID crisis. And just kind of, we talked about it before starting today, Mark, but how do you feel, there can be policy kind of maybe if it's got to be mixed in with the infrastructure bill that we're still waiting on going forward to actually push in this area and help in these areas for African American businesses around the country?
So I think it starts off with the, community leaders and people who are still in touch on the local level in the smaller version of government, right? City government, state government, things like that, and people who are closer in touch with what's going on in minority communities for those businesses. We need to recognize what help the people who have not gotten help from the COVID package, what that is. The people who were not able to get PPP loans, the people who had these difficulties going from bank to bank to bank trying to get what they needed, to survive. And there needs to be, they need to put those things together and kind of put together a package of ideas that can be put into the next package. Now, we know, a couple of factors are at play here. Number one, we have several states that are rolling back on some of the relief of the COVID relief that they are willing to accept. I live in Texas, and in Texas on June 26th, they are cutting off the and no longer accepting the federal aid $300 bonus weekly for the unemployment insurance, which means people could then, only be at the whims of whatever the state amount is, if at all. And they're putting heavier restrictions upon that as far as like you need to show certain numbers of job applications that you put in and, all sorts of different things like that. So, and you're seeing this pop up in many other states as well. So the accessibility to these loans is going to get even harder moving forward. And now you have another package that's in the works. Some people are calling it the job plan, some people are calling it the infrastructure plan. But that, number one, has not come to pass yet. That's still in the very early negotiation phase because it's another tremendous spending package bill. And between 2017 and now, we have had now 3 major government spending packages. And before someone's willing to sign off on a fourth, there's a lot of more pressure on where the payment for these things are going to come from. And, Biden had already put it out there that he was looking to raise corporate tax. He was looking to raise taxes on, high earnings and capital gains and things like that. And, the people who have that are not going to be willing to give that up. So there's still far to go in negotiations and where those things are. But what I would say is on the local level, this is the time to kind of put together what it is that those, what the minority community has not been able to get and has not gotten. There needs to be some language on why that didn't happen and why that was so difficult and ways to close those loopholes and to make it more fair and to make it more accessible and things like that to be able to enter it into that package. Because if this is indeed a job plan, then jobs for small businesses in minority communities where people will be able to work, earn money, and spend money in those same communities, I think, is probably an integral part of any job plan that you have. So this is something that, that could be done immediately to kind of, while this whole thing is a block of clay being molded, shaped, and formed before it is whatever statue it's going to be able to get this in there and get this to be a part of it.
Yes, sir. And I mean, as I told you a little earlier, over watching a couple news broadcasts over the past week or two, I saw, a bunch of minority businesses are facing the same issue across the country. And, this is just something that I think we need directly within this bill coming forward. with it being a $1.7 trillion bill, I'm pretty sure there's some allocation and funds that could be specified towards these communities and these small business and these homeowners to be able to assist in a full total recovery from the COVID pandemic that we have just went through last year. Also in the news this week, we kind of got a glimpse at the video on Ronald Green, which was a body cam actually resurfaced after 2 years. Kind of in the heat of the moment with everything that's going on around the country with police brutality and things of those nature. How do we feel, we can go about correcting it taking 2 years for us to finally get body cam, it taking a year for us to even see the justice department within that state even looking at, or the DA within that state even looking at this situation?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the more aggravating stories of the last year plus that we've been seeing a greater spotlight and attention on situations like this. And a couple of facts that really make this, that really make the skin crawl when you think of this is that, number one, yes, this happened 2 years ago. This happened a full year before George Floyd was murdered. And when you look at not only the situation of what happened to this man, when you listen to what was told to his family, because I think a very important point to the situation is that his family was initially told a story that he died on impact in a high-speed chase. There was a high-speed chase, and he did crash his car, but he did not suffer life-threatening injuries in that incident. He was actually pulled out of that car. He was tased. He was beaten. He was pressed into the concrete. He was dragged on the concrete with his hands tied behind his back. And those are the things that we could see on video. And so his family was given a completely fictitious story. And then when more information came out that called that story into question, they were given another fictitious story. And now I don't know if we're on story number 3 or 4, but I know we are now 2 years past this, and it took them 474 days to even pick up an investigation. So what this says to me is that even the body cams are not the end all be all when it comes to the type of reform that is required for the police. Because this body cam footage of George Floyd getting killed, this body cam footage of Andrew Brown, who was killed, and we've now seen that video, and they've just came out a few days ago and said that they will not be prosecuting those police officers, even though we saw the video and we saw how far away he was and driving away as he was shot in the back of the head. So at this point, we've had the marches, we've had the things, we've had the internet memes, we've had the social media gatherings, we've had the various podcasts and conversations by pundits left, right, and center. At what point does an actual definition of what reform means hit the table? At what point do we actually see someone introduce legitimate legislation that actually punish somebody for doing something like this? Because I can tell you this right now, if you did not wear a badge and you got into it with somebody and that person was beaten and that person was bloodied and that person later died, and you had a video of it and you told a story and you told a fictitious story more than once, and then video came out 2 years later of what you actually did to that person, you're going to prison for murder. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That is what is going to happen to you. And if that can happen to you as a regular citizen, we should be able to expect more from our police officers than we expect from the average citizen, because they, as I said many times before, have been given a tremendous responsibility, and that is policing their own population. I don't think people understand the gravity of how big a job that is. And the bottom line is that it can be no discussion further of, well, it's just a few bad apples. This is a systematic issue. I'm not saying again and again and again, not saying that all officers are like this or that all officers do this. There are many of them that do not. I need to get that out of the way before I say the next statement. But there is a pervasive, almost nationwide, you know, kind of infiltration of this type of mentality, this type of thinking, this type of whether it be racial animus, racial fear, need to dominate, whatever it is, whatever psychological problem it is that plagues these people when they do these things. There is a system that is built to keep them safe that is separate from the system designed to keep us safe. And that doesn't work. It hasn't worked. And it's time, well past time for people to stop dropping the normal platitudes, the normal talking points, the normal BS that we hear on radios and TVs every single day. People want to talk about reform. Where is the reform? What does reform mean? What happens to people when they do this? What is the apparatus to keep police and Justice Department basically in every single state accountable for the things that they do, for the decisions that they make? Like I've said before, we have it on the federal level. We do not have it on the state level. We don't have it on a county level. We don't have it on a city level where there is an oversight to these things. You'll have, once it gets passed and once the prosecutor decides, the district attorney or an attorney general or whatever, once they make a decision that they're not going to prosecute a situation, it is over. It is flat out over. And that's not right. And that is not justice. So, if nothing else, the demand of needing legitimate reform in the form of actual legislation, in the form of actual words, penalties. I've suggested many times that there should be a malpractice insurance that police officers themselves pay the same way as a doctor does. So when a doctor does not follow their training and does not follow the correct things and they harm someone, there's an avenue to deal with that person, not the whole profession, not the medical field, that person. And that should be the same way on police. When you sue the police for a wrongful death, it's not the police officers that pay. It's not the union that pays. It's not the pension that pays. It's the state. It's your own tax dollars coming back to you in the form of a big check to make you go away. And those usually come with non-disclosure agreements and gag orders to where you are not allowed to talk about what they did to your family members.
Is this reform something that you see that needs to happen at the local level or something that we need to be seeing at the national level? Because, especially with it being issues like the situation in Kentucky, now Kentucky taxpayers are paying for wrongful death lawsuit and things of that nature. So is this something that people should be pushing for within their state legislation, or is this something that we need to be pushing for nationally at this point?
At this point, I think it has to be pushed nationally because the problem is a national problem. It's a national epidemic, actually. This isn't a Georgia problem. This is not a Louisiana problem. It's not a Michigan problem. It's not a New York problem. It's an American problem. And I don't think you solve an American problem with 50 different plans. We saw what many, many different plans and how well that worked out for us during COVID and how well it's worked out for us on other things that people need. And people need to be safe and they need to have justice. So this needs to be handled on a national level. It needs to be oversight. I mean, I'm a big advocate for the states being able to work with the government on the implementation of it, but there's got to be a national plan to deal with the national problem.
Yes, sir. And I mean, even when we kind of rolling into our last topic today, speaking on the anti-Asian sentiment bill and how that was something passed nationally, HR Resolution 908 was something passed nationally for protection for Asian Americans and things of that nature. Why are we not seeing still these policies within the minority community that have been talked about and discussed over the past year being passed at the same time rate within the same time frame of something of this nature?
Well, and again, only offering my own opinion of the situation based on what I've seen. And in this case, what I don't see. When we started seeing a lot of anti-Asian sentiment after COVID-19 hit, what I did not see is I did not see a single Asian American go on television and speak openly about how what's going on in the Asian community isn't as bad as they think it is, or isn't as bad as it's being portrayed on TV, or that there are a lot of Asians out there who bring it on themselves, or if they would just be more understanding, then maybe this wouldn't happen. And the reason I say those things exactly that way, because that is something that we see in the Black community every single day. The Asian community does not have a Candace Owens. The Asian community does not have a Tim Scott going on television to say in one breath that he himself had been racially profiled, but at the same time, there is an isolated incident here or there. I don't know how many isolated incidents you need before you realize that there's a problem, but there is one. And when you are able to speak on a subject and not have the type of undercutting and pandering and self-dealing that will derail the type of movement you need on a subject, that subject gets addressed. It tends to. And we've seen that over time in this country. We've seen it with the Anti-Defamation League for Jewish people. We've seen it now with this situation. It can be done when there's a united voice of this isn't right and this needs to be addressed and fixed. And there's a financial component to it. There is a business component to it, but it's united, period. And as we see in many, many different situations, it is far too easy to get African American to turn on African American, or for African American who is a little bit more well to do, or who is being taken care of, or who has been taken care of their entire life, to be able to speak against the injustices that other people call out. I saw just as many people, I've seen so many people speak out, so many Black people speak out against different movements. And, I've seen people speak against, things that people like Killer Mike have said out on television. I've seen people speak openly against BLM and things like that. And it doesn't really matter if you agree with 100% of their particular philosophies or anything else or whatever. But when you speak against somebody, and when you speak against your own in a common interest, even though those interests may not perfectly line up with yours, you give room for people to be able to exploit that crack and open it up wide and make other people throw their hands up and go, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know who to support. I don't know where to go with it. That's the problem we see over and over and over again. And everything from COVID relief that we've seen from minority communities and how hard it's been, all the way up to reform for the police, like literally every subject we touch on today, it comes back to the exact same thing. We're not united in our opposition to our own equality. And the longer that continues on, the longer these things go. It's that simple.
So when you look at the movement kind of in the 70s and in the 80s and during that time period, do you feel like in the minority communities there was a, a heightened sense of unity than it has been for this movement? And, I've even stated before, at the protest last year, it was a lot of everyone else. It was a few of us, but it was a lot of everyone else mixed in, fighting for our equality, where we weren't showing the same level of energy. And you know, as I stated before, is that lack of energy that you could tell different from that time period when we were fighting for civil rights initially?
Oh, I can definitely say that is the absolute truth, because if you go back, we have the benefit of YouTube. We have the benefit of Google search engines. We have the benefit of being able to go back and look at the entirety of that civil rights movement, in a matter of hours, where instead of taking years. And I could find you many, many speeches by Malcolm X and by Martin Luther King and by so many others who, were pushing, for equality. You know what I won't find? I'm not going to find a lot of high profile African Americans speaking directly against the civil rights movement, saying that black people had it good enough on any type of stage during that time period. You're just not going to find it because there's a much heavier commercialization now. The the lure of self dealing to get yourself over and to get yourself paid and to get you taken care of and your family taken care of is far, far stronger now, 60 years after the fact, than it was then. We were all trying to get a piece of the pie at that time. We were all trying to be able to just have the basic rights to just not be murdered because you wanted, because of who, the color of the skin and the neighborhood you live in and happen to be in, or the school you wanted to go to, and things like that. Like when we were trying to get past that, that front was far more united. There were still some people that were content with sitting on the sidelines. There were still some people who were afraid to jump in the fight. But there were people there you didn't see the type of, well, I'm gonna get paid by this one news network to go out there every day and talk against this, and it's not really affecting me because I got a really nice house and I got a really nice car. So I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna speak against it. You didn't see that thing. That didn't exist. And if someone would have attempted it, it would have been talked down hard. And that's just not the world we live in right now. Like I said, we know where we are in this fight. And every day I could turn on the news and I can find 10, 15, 20 African American pundits that go and actively speak out against our movement and speak out against what we're going through and say, well, if he hadn't have ran from the police, oh, if he hadn't have been doing drugs, oh, if he hadn't have done this or that, this wouldn't have happened to him. Oh, we got to back the blue no matter what, all this other stuff. And it that just didn't exist then. It's really that simple.
And I mean, even as an organization, from the get go, that we, not to say we back the blue or anything, but we realize, that cops do have a job to do, and it's not the easiest job in the world, so it's not that we're against cops or anything of that nature, but, we are looking for accountability within that area and police reform and cops being able to police each other without facing backlash from their own departments and things of that nature, or losing their job or not being liked around their department because they called someone else out. So I think, across the board, I agree with you totally. The unity is definitely the main issue with getting any of these policies passed. And I mean, that's why you do see an anti-Asian sentiment bill being passed in a 3 months time versus we've been sitting with policy that's already rolled out, and voting policy, the gun rights voting bill, and things of that nature that have been on the table for years and have still not seen full passage. So I think, we got to totally get behind these policies. And, as you said, no matter if you have it good and, you have enough financially, you're taken care of, economically, you're taken care of. And why should I worry about the issues going on with anybody else? We all have to play a part in this for, our counterparts to actually be able to get justice in any aspect on any side of these issues. So, kind of ending today with our announcements. We still are currently running the contest for the What's Your Journey, and kind of speaking on what brought you into the movement. Why do you feel you want to be a part of Minority Alliance organization? And we'll be actually giving away 2 AncestryDNA.com kits to 2 of our winners of that contest there. Also, we are currently seeing more members come towards our audience podcastings and things of that nature. We're still doing our other segments, our Monday and Wednesday segments also. Just be able to go back onto our YouTube and subscribe and like and go over a couple of our videos and see, if there's any information there that could assist in your point of view on uh, this current movement and our fight for equality for all, across the board.
Absolutely. I would always encourage all members, to go on the YouTube, listen to it, to like, subscribe, turn on notifications, so you can find out what's going on, hear what we got going on, be able to contribute as well. I mean, each one of us knows someone who talks about these issues, who goes through these issues, who are personally touched by them. And being able to, kind of put these things out there and get ideas across and talk about the different things that plague, our community. It's really, really important, and it's good to be able to have that outlet and for people to get turned on to it and, to kind of really push these things forward. Again, all these things are done for the benefit of everyone to be able to move forward and live, just to be able to live your life and to be able to live your life free of the type of prejudices and the type of problems and issues that we have seen for far too long. And the last thing that I would say today is, I'm not a very religious person, but there's a religious phrase that really goes well with it, and that is, "But for the grace of God." For those people who don't get it and don't understand that maybe just because you got a little bit more, you got something going on and things like that, that you shouldn't be a part of this movement. You don't have a dog in the fight and things like that. But for the grace of God, you can be one of those people getting yanked out of your car and tased and beaten and killed. I know many Harvard educated men and, professors in school who have been harassed and who have been racially profiled, and people who have had different things. I saw a story about a week ago of a young lady whose house was appraised for double what she originally had it appraised for, just because she lied and said she was white. These are the sort of things that, just because you sidestep this landmine doesn't mean that the next step could be you, or it could be your children, or it could be your brother, or it could be your mother. We need to get past this for everyone's sake and for the future. I have 2 grandchildren. We all have children out there. We all have grandchildren out there. We want a better world for all of them, and we want a better world for ourselves. We want, people to have, adults to have the right to work, children to have a future, and for the elderly to have security. In order to get those things, we have to push past the obstacles. And we don't get there if we're not doing it together. As it's always been said in this organization, that togetherness is the key to a better tomorrow. It's never more true than now. So, my last statement on this is that, as always, you got to take care of each other, take care of yourselves, keep your eyes open, and, continue to listen and continue to add to this fight, to this movement. And we'll see you guys next week.